So we're at my brother and sister-in-law's house, but they're not married anymore. But so my sister-in-law is there for her week. And they have this beautiful house and they have a thermidor oven.
Ooh.
Wow.
Okay. And Jason and I cook all the time. And so the lady that cooks for them made us homemade chickpea hamburger patties. And then like she also got like Alexa French fries, which we cook those all the time. So we come home and I'm like, perfect. Jason's like, I'll warm up the French fries. They had already been cooked, but just warm them up. 325, like, you know, just, in our oven, it takes about maybe, you know, takes probably a good like 10 minutes, 15 to get to. 5 minutes in, we're like doing a puzzle. I'm like, Jason, something's burning. He comes over. Whoosh.
What?
The French fries, everything, like within 5 minutes, it had already like burnt to black crisp. So we take it out and put it on the patio. And my sister-in-law comes home and she's like, what's burning? I'm like, Jason was just trying to.
Oh, their oven did that.
Yes. Yes, the thermidor. And I'm like, I don't know how much thermidors are. I'm gonna say probably 10 grand. I don't know. I'm like, for $10,000, it better fucking work. And she's like, yeah, we don't ever use that. And I'm like, what? Why do we have such a nice oven? And we never, she's like, we always use the microwave. And I'm like, no, like everything I have, I use, it has its purpose. And if I don't know how to use it, either I learn how to use it or we don't have it.
You know what else is really curious about this is like, maybe it was ready at 2 minutes and it's just that much faster and they don't know how to use it. Like the idea that things can happen really fast.
Yeah. I mean, we're totally used to something, you know, we have a KitchenAid, you know, we're used to it heating up, you know, within 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 10 or 15, whatever. Yeah, super fast. But so it's
But we
funny.
just don't know how to use it versus like a microwave. We know how to use a microwave that's fast, but maybe we don't know how to use an oven that's fast, a different type of tool to get your food cooked.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but I see a huge metaphor in this.
To me, it sounds like it was acting more like an air fryer because those heat up quick.
Yeah. It's just very fascinating.
So it was all burnt and ruined.
Oh yeah, but the burgers were fine, but the French fries, you know, they were like burnt to a crisp. I was concerned when you have, like Jason said, when you have over a 5,000 square foot house, they require, a lot of homes, at least in Texas, require you to install like professional sprinklers, you know, like, and they have them in their house. And I just knowing, because I mean, he opened that oven and it just was like, whoosh, you know, just like smoke wished us throughout the kitchen and the living room. And I opened the big, you know, patio doors. But later he told me, he's like, no, it's not based on smoke. It's based on temperature in the room is when the sprinklers go off, you know? Yeah, so funny. So.
That's awesome.
So.
What are we talking about today?
We talked about on Friday, if we wanted to talk about parents and our parents, us as parents. Tanya and I were texting earlier today about all of our theme song should be that up level. What is it that I sent you?
Level up. Yeah, level up.
Level up, level up, level up, level up.
Here it comes. Yep.
So Grayson's like, we got to dance to this and then send it to you guys. Level up, level up, level up, level up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Boom. Yes.
Talking about, I mean, I know we're going to talk about money next month, but this will tie into parents though, right? Like my parents taught me you've got to work, earn the money, and then you get to have fun. So I notice where my brain right now is like, you got to go do something. You can't be having this much fun.
and my relationship with my mom, I recently went over to my mom's house and was going through some pictures and things, you know, getting ready for her service. We've got a bunch of pictures that we need to scan in, and some of her mementos, and she was not inclined to keep a journal or a diary or anything like that. But in 1999, where we were partying like 2000 was like everything was gonna go away, I gave her a journal, and it says, "To Mom, for your new journey, happy Mother's Day, love, Tanya." And she actually wrote an entry in here that was on the May 23rd of 99. And it's talking about both money and food. Like, my experience this morning was around body. And I was thinking about where I was at this time last year, my relationship with my body, of not loving myself. Like, I put on some weight and I thought that made me unlovable, unattractive, unworthy. And like, from there to where I'm at right now, I'm like, I love all of this. And I'm noticing, like, I had the thought the other day, do my thighs make you uncomfortable? The size of my thighs make you uncomfortable? Because I love them now, whereas I spent so many years hating them. I was thinking about my relationship to food. I was thinking about my relationship to my body and pleasure. Like the idea that, so I had a little bit of the restrictiveness with money, like I really need to do something. Especially when I'm asking my husband to spend, I'm like, be fine with spending $500,000 right now. It's totally fine. We can make more. Where's the problem in that? And I was thinking about my body and the restriction of food, and thinking, oh, sugar is bad. And I'm like, wait a second. First of all, the body operates on sugar. Like, that is what it converts everything to. So maybe I'm making it real easy if I just cut out all the stuff in between. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to eat sugar. That's fine. Like, it's totally fine, which goes against every grain of what our parents taught us. Also with money, like I shared with Erin the other day that my heart was like, what if you just did everything for free? And I was like, okay, I could see some stuff, but wait, what? You want me to just do everything for free? What are you, fucking nuts? Because we want to create and realize from that 3D space of when we go on a diet, when we deprive our bodies of pleasure, then we get the thing that we want. When we don't spend money and we save it up so that we can get the thing that we want. So we deprive ourselves of our experiencing pleasure right now. And that is like my mother and father, their stories in a nutshell of depriving themselves from love, from pleasure, from connection, from being seen, all of those things. And I'm like, my head's exploding right now. My ego is exploding.
You know, with our parents, I mean, I'm sure we're okay with ages, right? I'm 41, Tanya, you're 52.
Yep, about to be 53, but not
53,
there yet.
right? Brenda, around the same age, right?
55.
55, right? So our parents, maybe your parents, maybe the two of your parents were they? I know my grandfather, he was born in 30s, so he was a child of the Great Depression, right?
My grandmother.
Okay, so all of our grandparents, right, were children of the Great Depression. which was very survival based. I mean, my great grandmother came over on a boat from Belgium, rode the boat for 3 weeks. You know, my great grandfather had already come over 2 years earlier, and they were like shoemakers in Belgium. And I think like back in those times, right? Like it was very survival. It was like, you have to earn your money, you have to do the thing. And then if there's anything left over, then we get to have fun, then we get to enjoy ourselves. But we have to make a living, we have to, you know, survive and
for
push
tomorrow.
Yeah. And, you know, Tanya, like you always talk about, like it's in our DNA, right? It gets passed down. And we aren't really that far removed, right? So my parents, your parents were children of the parents of the Great Depression, right? So that's very close to home for them in terms of, you know, my grandfather probably teaching my dad, right? Like, we don't have money for that. You can't spend money on that. And that very much fear-based place versus now, I think we're more into that thriving, like, and we don't earn money. I don't even want to say earn money, right? But like, it's a very intellectual way, I think, now that we can receive money versus how it used to be like physical manual labor of working. But then our parents, right? I mean, that's how I was brought up. Like, you have to work, you have to go get a job to make money to then have fun. Kind of like what you were saying with the food, right? Like, so if I just want to like bypass and do the sugar, like, why don't I just have fun? And then trusting and believing that money comes from that space.
Now there was a study done. I want to say that Kathy Kane was talking about it in one of. She's got a video out and about how they said like up to 5 generations can hold that story in our DNA, in our physical bodies, with the traumas. So you think about like Jewish people in Auschwitz. They're still holding that in their bodies. And then, you know, Black people and people of color, of any kind of color, have had their own stories of oppression or trauma come through their physical bodies. And I love what you just said just now about how we've moved from, in a lot of ways, we've moved from manual labor to thought labor, because this is also showing how we've moved that story out of our bodies and into our heads. And now we need to take them out of our heads and bring them back to our hearts. Just noticing this evolution, I kind of have likened this sometimes to the, you know, when cell phones first came out, they were these giant bricks, right? And then we just kept making them smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we're going back to making them bigger and bigger and bigger. But like their functionality, what they're doing, how they're connecting, what they can do is the thing that's evolving. And so I sort of look at like the human animal, the technology within the human is, we were in this very primal, we've moved from like the caveman state, very in the body, not in the head, survival instinct, to moving out of maybe some of the manual labor. We've automated so many things, we've got robots doing jobs, and there's still plenty of manual labor jobs in the world, but a lot of them have moved into more of this intellect, more of the thought. And I think the wave that we're at right now is moving that into our hearts, out of our heads and into our hearts, and shedding that old fear skin that says that our abundance, our riches come from outside of us. We're paid for that in a job. Our lovability, our ability to be seen and accepted and embraced is by how we look. Like having a body that fits into what society will accept and embrace, instead of realizing that our loving, our unconditional love comes from inside of us, not from the conditions outside of us. Like just the pure definition of unconditional love and acceptance is something outside of us. I just totally went off on a.
But it comes back to our parents too, right? Because when you think about it, it's like when you're in that stress mode, when you're in that survival mode, we can't get to the heart because you're just trying to put food on the table. You're trying to make sure you pay your rent or mortgage. You don't have any space, right, to think or explore about what life could be like, because you're just trying to put one foot in front of the other, right? And I think with the way that our consciousness is moving, right? Like now we're able to like expand, but like, you know, you think about like the 80s, right? It was like work really hard, play really hard. And now we've been moving to let's have some fun, and byproducts from that come, right? Versus do this, get this, right? And from our parents, if you're not, you know, it's like I was up in Dallas this weekend, and both my uncle and also my sister-in-law, like their children, like it seemed like that they didn't really have a choice. Like, you're going to go to college. And this equation of like, you go to college and then to get a job. And even if, you know, my nephew wants to start his own business, but it's like this idea of our parents didn't go to college. So now we want a better life for you. So you need to go to college. But we all know there's no guarantee, right? I mean, that you're going to go to college and have a job or whatever it might be, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what the statistics are with how many children have gone to college, and now we have all of this debt and no jobs, or not even a job that they got a degree in, right?
And then there's me sitting here with no degree, almost like on purpose. I have done enough education that I probably should have a bachelor's or a master's, but because I didn't go to the certain school to give that to me, I don't have those credentials to put behind my name, which actually is quite liberating. You know what this makes me think of? It's learning, like we just moved to using microwaves for everything. Think about how it was when, like previous generations, we went from using a fire to using an oven. And then I remember when microwaves first came out. Yes, I'm sure, Brenda, you probably remember it too.
Yep.
I remember, actually, this is a fun little story. My mom and my grandmother, they had this thing where if you brought in silver, like silver coins or gold, that you could exchange that for a microwave. And they were both like scooping up all of their saved coins and taking it in to get microwaves. And that became like all of the rage. And then we moved from cooking in the oven to moving to cooking in the microwave because it was fast. And then now, like, that is the movement from the body to the head. And then what we're asking now is like to be able to cook rapidly out of the microwave, like just the analogy, and I know you may cut the first part or maybe you don't, but just the realization of how we're wanting to move faster, we're wanting to transform faster, we're wanting to heal these old stories of fear and deprivation, and we have to suffer in order to have this one little treat that we want. Just, I don't know, for whatever reason, I was like oven to microwave to this like super speed. What kind of oven did you say it was?
The brand, I think, is a Thermador. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah. It's probably a convection, I'm guessing.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the speed in which that cooks in a more thorough way than a microwave, right? Like, you can't brown something in the microwave, which is kind of ironic because just before this, the egg bites that I wanted to heat up, I put them in my convection oven because I wanted to have a little bit of that crispness on it, and just sticking it in the regular microwave doesn't give me that kind of flavor. And anyway, just was like, oh, the oven to the microwave to like the convention super fast Thermador kind of thing. And our evolution from our parents' parents, how we got money, how we find our safety, how we find love and connection. I just see all of the sort of parallels there.
How we operate in relationships too, right? Because we were talking over the weekend and we had a large ladies group get a meet and greet, and my mom was there. And one of the things that she was just so amazed at is she said, in my entire life, I've had 3 female friends. I never hang out in groups of women. I don't know how to hang out in groups of women. I always hang out with the guys, which then gives me the aha moment. That's been how I've been too, because I didn't know how to relate to other women because I didn't have that modeled for me, right? And so now I'm working through that story of I don't have female friends, right? That's been my story. And just to hear that it's literally generational, right? Because she's sitting there saying the same thing, and how marveled we both were at the fact that we had 23 women in a place most of them had never met each other before. Some of them had, but most of them had not. And there was not one Karen. And there was, except for the noise, and we've talked about noise too, but except for the noise, which was just 23 women talking, which can happen when you get that many women together, it was just the most pleasant experience. But not having that comfort or previous experience that could be okay, that was a big learning for me. It's like, oh, this is something else I have to work through because of her experience and her story passed down to me. And I just thought that was really kind of cool that she was marveling on it herself, that it was actually a fun experience, even though it got really loud at points. The loud wasn't negative. It was there, but it wasn't negative. And hearing that she has issues processing that noise and knowing I have issues processing, it was just like a heredity thing going, boop, there you go, that's why. And it is mine now because I've allowed it to be mine. And to hear it coming from her that was hers, I just thought that was fascinating, of how to be in relationships with others. It was cool.
Just before getting on this call, I was having a discussion with my husband. He's getting ready to retire, and which you guys know. And one of the things that has sort of been on our list is to talk to our financial advisor. And I was sort of exploring some ideas today around the idea of maybe why he was not dreading that, but he's like, well, we still need to talk to our advisor. And when we were talking about that, I said, do you think any of this goes back to when you were a younger boy growing up, asking your dad for money and having him say no, or other times where you did ask for money and borrowed it and then felt judged about how you were using it or whether or not you'd paid it back yet. And he said, you know, yeah, that was some of my experience, but actually some of my experience around spending the money in my retirement is from you. And I was like, oh, do tell. And he's like, I went from being responsible for myself to being responsible for our family. And he's like, I actually am genuinely interested in what our financial advisor has to say, because he has the expertise and understanding of knowing how to manage that money. And I was like, ooh. But he said that with me, he's like, you were always about save. Don't spend money, don't spend money, don't spend money. And now I'm asking, I'm like, yeah, just go buy a $500,000 boat. It's not a problem. And we can finance it because our money will outpace what the cost of the financing is for this boat. And he's just like, so he's like, you're always being on me about saving, don't spend, save, don't spend. And I was like, oh, that was my mom's story coming through. But it was also connecting within him because his mom, I mean, they were young parents. So yeah, just seeing how even like our parents come through and then affect our spouses in those relationships, and how, you know, his experience with his mom, who's also passed, you know, that's been actually one of the driving factors that's allowed him to say, you know what, I think I am ready to retire, because you know, his mom retired and within a year she passed away with money in the bank. And yeah, so just all of the threads and how we weave these relationships together, it
goes back, right? It still goes back to like, okay, because we have to save the money because you never know what's going to happen, right? Which is totally my parents' story, which totally was my story. But if we look at the way time is, right, a lot of us think time is linear, right? And like, okay, so when do we get to? The other thing too is like, we're training ourselves to save money. So if you're saving money for 40, you know, if the average person stays at a job or has a business, whatever, and just saves money and doesn't really use it and have what I call like a healthy relationship with money, right? You don't just flip a switch and go from a spender or a user of money from a saver. You know, you have like those neural pathways are so deep. But that's what the financial industry, that's what, you know, all of, yeah, the financial industry and like what we've been taught, right, from our parents, grandparents, right? Like just.
Yep. It's funny you should say that. This morning when I was sitting, I was having a moment where I was like, I don't know what I want to do for my meditation. Should I move first? Should I do this first? And for whatever reason, I clicked on an intro breath work that I had done at Wellness from Within. And I'm like, why am I listening to this? I was talking to myself. Apparently my future self needed to talk to myself today about making a path through the snow when we'd recently had some snow and ice. This was last year. And I was talking about our narrow pathways and how when we're forming new ones, we're basically cutting a new path, and there's going to be some resistance there. Like, it's not just going to be an easy path right from the get-go. There's always going to be some resistance. So struggle, yes. Suffer, no. And I think a lot of what we've experienced as children of previous generations is the suffering piece and the disconnection from, we have to save because we think we have to save, and whether this is completely conscious or not, who knows? I think in a lot of people it isn't. we have to save because we think that this money or this wealth comes from outside of us. And we don't believe and trust in the fact that we are the people that are actually creating this wealth. And so there's this need to save. It's like Kyle talks about, like, you're not going to stockpile your house with all the food you're going to eat for the rest of your life. You can go out and get some more. Well, this is like wealth is created from who we are. We are the apple tree. And this idea that we have to save is not trusting that we will always be generating wealth by being who we are.
And that also impacts your view on debt, right? So my story has been debt is bad, and don't have debt and get out of debt as fast as possible. And I can tell you that I have successfully passed that down to my daughter. Well, it's the aha moments later in life, but you realize, what's happened. After she was done with college, we had her move home for 2 years and work, not charge her rent or anything, because it was like, get that debt paid down. You don't want to be struggling under that debt for forever, because I see people with student loan garnishments on their checks forever and ever and ever and ever because they get, to pay them off. So we did that. And then it was like, okay, now pay off your car. And my guise for that is, or my belief for that is, do it now. Again, back to the suffer now, so that you don't have to suffer later and you have all those options available to you when you're not tied down. Because to me, debt is equivalent to tied down, or has been equivalent to tied down. And, then that brings back to my mind, you've worked so hard for what then? Right? If all the money is going to pay off debt, where's the play? Because even if you have enough money to pay the bills, I'm still not playing. I'm still not viewing it as a joyful tool. It's still a work mechanism. And so even just coming to those realizations is pretty stunning. I've not figured out what money story I've passed down to my son yet. It's definitely different than what I passed down to my daughter, because he doesn't do anything and I'm paying his bills. So he's got an entirely different wavelength on life there than my daughter, who works hard and has
Maybe it's the same. It's like the yin and the yang, right? One that's working hard and paying off all of her stuff, and one that's not and allowing themselves to be supported.
Interesting that the ones that are going out and the working and the doing and all that are the female side, and the not doing is the male side, which is completely opposite to my historical past, because it was always the men providing and the women being supported. So that's interesting.
Maybe that's the contrast that you've been gifted with exploring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, when you said, like the story I passed down to my daughter, I suddenly just was like, of course, the story I passed down to my daughter was a story about her body, weight, worthiness, lovability. Also a story about money, because we made sure that we were able to pay for her college so she didn't have that debt. And there was a part of me that almost wanted her to have that, because I talked about that going into college. I'm like, we'll pay for this part, but we want you to be invested. And then when it came to it, David was like, if we can do it, I want to pay for everything. So yeah, but I
want you invested in it so that you'll take it seriously. That was mine.
Like this underlying belief, right? Like, unless you actually struggle a little bit, you're not going to have any learning from
or
it. Appreciation.
No. Yeah.
It's funny, in my mom's, this little thing that the little bit she wrote. Do you guys mind if I read it?
No.
Because there's both elements of like the money and the body image in this. Of course, my first entry, my life is out of control again. And I thought that after the first class, I would at least, I would not overeat. It seems the opposite. I'm eating more. I'm afraid of my feelings. I've let them go numb for so long. I'm definitely in the infancy stage of this being unable to be the adult that most of the time I do maintain. Class excites me. So I think at this point, my mom was going back. This is when she went back to college because she was incarcerated. She was a neonatal nurse for all of her life until she got injured. And then like a whole nother conversation. She basically was incarcerated from the time our daughter was 6 months old until she was 2.5. And so when she came back out, she went back to nursing because that was the thing that she loved. So she was going back to school because she'd let her nursing license lapse and she was basically maintaining it. Class excites me and it scares me that when I took Tanya to New York, I tried to resolve why I couldn't remember much before the age of 10. I came back with no answers. Stress, of course. Will this be another trip to New York? One thing I'm going to try and keep in mind is that Tanya and I were not close as we are now. Now she too is a mother. Plus there is a mental health teacher as part of this. Her name is Nessa, and perhaps she can help and make this productive. On page 108 and 109, I think she was talking about a book that she was working through. I am Carl, my father was depriving, and I have wrote off intimacy, love, and caring. Prior to my back injury, I did focus on getting ahead, making money, and being busy. At least when the kids were little, my ability to save made our trips to Shasta and Disneyland and various places a humorous sense of pride. Now hearing from Tanya that I made things magical and forces that special time in my life. Now I don't have that ability to make money. It frustrates me and I turn to food. Review pages 114 and 115 often. I have the ability. Looking back at my childhood, I do not remember the feeling of being fat. You know, I wasn't popular in high school or junior high, but the non-popularity was always blamed on moving every 2 to 3 years. The most important move was when we left San Diego to go to Japan. My mother and father had bought a home in San Diego. I had a real home with a huge room. I finally had a best friend, Linda. I became cognizant at that age of friends, family, and how things should be. My father had been mostly gone. He was in the Navy and on submarines, which my father was, by the way, too. So he very seldom was a part of my life. He would occasionally come home from 6 months at a time, and each time he came home, my mother's attention always changed to putting me first. At 10 years of age, it was not understandable, and especially at 13 and 14, when I had my first home and my first best friend. Yes, I had friends before, but this was the stage in life when I felt stable. Feeling letter to mother and father, I still remain unaware of any weight issues. Interrupted and not being able to focus energy needed to complete work. Excuses, 1,000. Acceptable excuses, none. I am alone. I am responsible for my happiness and well-being, all underlined. I feel angry at myself, at Mary, which was her ex, for allowing me to be manipulated, thinking that that power was outside of her. Angry at myself for repeatedly allowing to be taken advantage of. That's the end of it. And I had read, the first time I read this was right before, or right after having had a conversation with my daughter about how she was feeling taken advantage of at work and in Japan. Just noticing all the the interwoven threads and stories. Like my mom made sure that I had the same house growing up, except for the time that I went and lived with my father, because that was something she didn't have. And her story was she might have been able to have friends if we'd lived in the same place. She might have been able to have those connections, or she had them and then they were taken away from her when her father moved her to Japan. So just noticing all the things that our parents are teaching us about the story.
I too moved around a ton as a child. And I also blamed lack of friends on moving too much and not having the time enough in one place to actually form those friendships. And fascinatingly enough, one of those 2-year stints recently just showed back up in my life as a Facebook friend. And I even asked, are you sure you remember who I was? Because I didn't feel like I was part of her world long enough to have made an impact, right? Because the stories we tell ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't remember me. I was just there. I was a blip in their frying pan. I wasn't, memorable or anything else. So hearing that she also blamed it on not being in a place long enough totally resonates with me. It's a story. It's absolutely a story.
Yeah.
Because it can't be here, right? That can't exist here because that's hurtful or it's painful to acknowledge that I didn't open myself to those relationships. I didn't engage in them as much as I could have and gotten different storyline out of it. And so learning to do the more reach out and be connected and be a connecting person, changing lives.
Yeah. That's that cutting the new pathways.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be some resistance that comes up. Erin, what's connecting for you in the moment?
It's interesting because we did move around a lot, but I always had the story, like I can make friends easily because I just did it so often. But also noticing, wanting to have a stable home for Grayson, which, I think about now where my friendships, not any of them are in my local place, right? But yeah, just the constant, but you think about consciousness and like, I don't know if my mom makes this comment a lot, like, well, we didn't have all of the tools that you have now, like the awareness, I guess, or like, our security is within us. It's not outside of us. And so as it would be natural, right? And understanding that Tanya, your mom would, and Brenda for you, right? Like that you would think like, oh, I don't have friends because we move around so much, because were we actually taught back then that it comes from within, not external,
So then I have a pokey question for you.
Me? Yeah.
Yeah. So you had the story, I can make friends easily because I do it often.
Yeah.
What changed? Because we've had the conversation before about how we were asking for more friendships, more intimacy, more like deeper, real connections. What shifted between I make friends easily to where you were at when we met?
I think probably 5th grade, right? When I did experience a lot of what I went through with 5th grade, and kind of pulling back and like from a protection mechanism, or self-preservation, whatever we want to call it. And I've always had like 1 or 2 friends, not a lot of friends, whatever that looks like, right? And but never like long term though. Like when I think about, okay, so sixth grade, I had a couple of girlfriends, but then after I moved, then we probably didn't hang out anymore. And then I went to a new school and had some friends. And then finally, I think in ninth grade, we stayed. So ninth through 12th grade, I stayed. And then we went all off to college, and that kind of dissipated. And then I had one or two girlfriends in college, and then I met some through work, and I have kept, one of those. But I think it's kind of like I'll get close, but not too close, or maybe the deep intimacy or connection. Like, have I really been able to do that? Like, I wasn't able to do that probably with myself, right? So then I couldn't experience it with anyone else.
What happened in fifth grade?
Are you asking so that? Oh, you're so funny. So I don't even know how it started. I know that I had gone first through fourth grade, I had gone to a private school. And then in fifth grade, that's when my parents had, experienced some of their money issues, troubles, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if that was the reason why we went to public school or if we moved. I don't remember. Or no, I don't know if I've ever asked that question. So I went to a public school. I left the private school. We went to the public school. And the girl that was there in the private with me through first through fourth, I guess she had already left maybe a year before. So she was already in the same school I was going to be in. So I thought, I'm leaving the private school. I already know Gretchen, right? We'll come, we'll hang out, we'll be friends. And she has a new friend, new clan, new clique, whatever you want to call it. And wanting that sense of belonging, right? And noticing like, and I don't even know how, but one of the girls, I guess if you want to say leader of the pack, right? It's like one day we would decide like who we were going to be friends with, and the next day we wouldn't be friends. And so of course, wanting belonging, wanting connection, it didn't make sense to me. I would get really upset. Like I missed a lot of school in fifth grade. And the not understanding why Gretchen was what I perceived to be turning, right? Like, why can't we all be friends? Why are you now just her friend and whatever she says goes? And so, yeah, like it got to the point where the principal had just called and was like, listen, I know she's a straight A student, but she can't skip school anymore. And I think my mom, we were going through all of the money stuff too at that time. So my mom was just trying to like, she had to go get a job. How do you deal with your kid who's like mentally and emotionally distraught, right? And so just letting me stay at home. And finally, they were like, listen, you can't let you stay at home anymore. Like you're gonna have to go face the music. And I remember like my dad like prepping me on the way to school, like, okay, here's what you tell her, like either we're gonna be friends or we're not gonna be friends. But none of this back and forth stuff. I mean, I'm sure it was very PG related, but basically it was like, take it or leave it, lady. Like, what do you, are we or are we not? And so that's what I did. I guess you would call it like modern day bullying, right? Someone, people might be like modern day bullying, right? Like that's what it was. And being so scared, right? And just telling them like, listen, you either are or you aren't, but I'm not carrying your books for you. I'm not like, all of the things. And I mean, I want to say that we ended up being friends afterwards. It definitely wasn't any more like, leader of the pack or being mean. I mean, obviously I had to continue to go to school after that. But it's interesting, like my dad said, he goes, when I told you that, because he used to work for his dad, and he goes, I never knew how hard it was to like stand up to somebody until I actually had to stand up to my own dad when I was having the same kind of, I don't want to work with him, I really need to tell him some things kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that was kind of that for me. I think that was kind of the time when I just kind of like disconnected, from myself. Like it was just too painful, right? Like I lay out all my cards on the table, and this is how you could get hurt. Like I'll just keep you at an arm's length distance. And also, has always had my like, Brenda, you've talked about this before too, but like the underdog, right? Like I've always been super sensitive, if we want to call it underdog, right? Like super sensitive to anybody who's ever eating by themselves, or, like the standing up for someone. And we all know, right? Like that everyone can take care of themselves. It's just, they are not taught that, but, the inclusivity, right? Never wanting anyone to be left out, because at least for me, knowing what it feels like. And so, yeah, like, so from that point on, I probably had like one or two close girlfriends. And yeah, I didn't know how to have real close connections, right? Because I didn't probably have, I think that there were some that were really close with, but I think just maybe as you change and you don't, my thought was like going to different schools and things of that sort, you don't stay connected anymore.
The word that just keeps coming up over and over. So it's interesting, as you've been talking, I had the awareness. I'm like, of course, I'm with the two people that have 39 in their profiles, like the poking, the provocateur, right? The defending the underdog kind of thing. And what I was hearing when you were talking about Gretchen is tricked. Like I thought I would just be able to go from here to here, and I've been tricked. And then the other girl keeps changing her mind about like who's going to be friends, who's not. Tricked again, which I think I've shared with you guys. I've been exploring my Black Moon Lilith, and I had a moment when I was reading about the house that it's in for me, and the fact that she is in Gemini, and it's talked about being a trickster. And I was like, oh no, that's not okay for me to be like that. And my friend just, Erin will freak out if she knows that I'm a trickster. Apparently I have this in me.
It's really interesting, because I was like thinking about that the other day. I'm like, where did that initially come from? The tricking. But Grayson said it to me in the grocery store today, and I was like, I can't be tricked. But it was just interesting how, like, she's like, I tricked you or something like that. And I don't know if it came from my mom. I don't know. It's just very interesting. Like that has been
maybe even your dad. Like I was sold this bill of goods, and maybe it's both of them.
Yeah, maybe. I know that like I've shared, going out and working for them, and then figuring out, their financial position at the company and feeling tricked, right? Like feeling like that's not what we discussed. Like I wasn't aware of all of this. Like, and I think what comes back to, for me, tricked means I wasn't fully aware to make my own decision. Right? Like had I had known, and I'm sure that's the definition, right? But like if I was fully aware, if everything was out on the table, I might have made a different decision. And then what came up is now I'm obligated, which that's a story that I've had, right? Like when you commit to something, you stick with it, you don't make changes. And so when you have that obligation story, then you feel like you are tricked, right? Because now how are you supposed to get out of it?
The story that my parents handed down to me, or maybe the theme for me, was it's been taken from me. It's been stolen from me, whether it was love or money or attention or connection. For me, it was that. Brenda, what do you think yours has been? Like, if we were to have a theme, I think Erin's might be tricked. Mine would be stolen from, like it was taken from me. What do you think yours would be?
Prohibited.
Prohibited?
Prohibited, yeah.
Like not
No.
allowed.
Not allowed. I had a lot of story from mine, religious upbringing, certain religious things that prohibited me from having friends that were outside the church, and from lots of lack coming from that place too, because things were prohibited. Even down to food, right? Things were prohibited. You couldn't leave the table before your plate was clean, right? That you were prohibited from doing that. You were, there was a point several years where we only had food stamps. And so all the things a kid wants to have was prohibited because we didn't have the money to pay for it. So there was a lot of can't have. And so when you can't have, you don't even know what it looks like and so you go that rebound when things free up for yourself. And so I was super skinny kid all the time. And then when I could buy the food that I wanted, I bought all the junk, and I still struggle with it, all the junk that I was not allowed to have. And for a period of time, I was perfectly okay with that because I was justified in it. And there was no conflict with my body about having it. But then as you get guilt and things building up of, I shouldn't eat that 24/7, then you start having a problem with the food and putting the weight on and struggling with that because there's the guilt following the prohibited. Right, so my theme word would be prohibited.
You know what's really interesting, since you, Brenda, and I are considered power and Tanya is considered love, like prohibited and tricked, for at least for me, it seems like it's very much like I'm not in control. I've lost my power. Someone's taken that away from me. And then you, Tanya, right? Like stolen, is that what you said? Stolen from me is more like the connection, right? Like the love, right? It feels that way of like power for us. Like you didn't let me make my own decisions, right? Very powerful. And then Tanya, for you, is like love was taken from me.
Yeah.
And see, I was going through so much with the prohibited, I didn't even notice the connection part wasn't there for a long time. Because my whole life was, you can't. Not even understanding that what could be. And that's been part of what we're working through too, is opening up to what can be.
My favorite analogy recently is that of the butterfly, right? The first half of the butterfly's life is as a caterpillar, just eating its way through everything, just consume, so that it has all the energy that it needs when it goes into the chrysalis to basically turn itself into DNA soup, reconfigure everything, and then come out the butterfly. And then before it gets to spread its wing and just hop about enjoying the sweet nectar and smell of the flowers, it has to struggle to get out of the chrysalis. It doesn't have to suffer, but it has to struggle. And I sort of see that in this whole analogy, like, Erin, you've been consuming trick, like all this time, saving up the energy for exploring the other side of not tricked, like how it turns into soup. We've all had various moments where we've been in the process of being in the DNA soup of completely reconfiguring our beliefs So for me, you know, I've been exploring for 50 some years the idea that love was stolen from me, money was stolen from me, connection was stolen from me. And so now, of course, my theme right now is I just want to give, because I'm so abundant, it's flowing through me. I want to give money, I want to give love, I want to give time, I just want to give. But I had to go through the struggle. So the struggle of changing everything that's been taken away from me, like even the difference between my grandmother passing away, everything that I lost, to my mom passing away and everything that I gained. So Brenda, what do you think, like, on the opposite side of prohibited is? And Erin, what do you think the opposite side of tricked for you is?
The only phrase that comes to my mind is no fucks given.
Nothing is off limits.
Right, it's like,
Prohibited.
it's nothing is prohibited anymore. It's like, I don't care. I care about the rules of certain things, but about the rules that have been imposed on me my entire life, I don't care about those rules anymore. I'm blowing through them and working through them, so it's freedom.
Yeah, I was going to say choices, right? Because tricked to me, like I already said, feels like then you don't have another choice, right? But if you didn't know something and you came into something unknown and then you found out something later on, you can redecide, you can re-choose. And that was never something that I was taught. Like, you know, how many times do you sign up for a class and like, too bad, you got to deal with it because we paid for it. You got to see it all the way through, or you know, piano or some type of sport or like all of the things. Like, it doesn't matter that you now are in it and you want to make a new decision. Too bad, you've got to see it till it ends. Versus what are my choices now, right? Like I made a choice then. Okay, it got me here. And do I want to keep making the same choice I made, or do I want to make another choice, which ultimately, right, is freedom in choosing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I choose, I decide.
Mm-hmm.
I choose, I decide. I am unconditional love. I am wealth.
Yeah.
Yes, Erin.
I was just going to say, which when you know that you are unconditional love, right? When you're okay, when you are your source of safety, it's okay that someone else is upset with you. It's okay that I told you I would do this and now I'm not going to, because me, number one, I'm first, and not like someone second, but like me taking care of me, my desires, my wants, what society has deemed selfish, which isn't, right? That's most important. Like I will never deny or disconnect from me.
Did you ever think that you would be in the position of wanting to show people or be the model of what selfish is like?
No, because I know when I wanted, this was before COVID, because selfish, right? I was taught like, don't be so selfish, right? Don't, as mothers, right? Like you give to your kids. And I don't necessarily know if, I mean, I had some of that, right, indoctrinated in me. But I know before COVID, when I was going to go to a surf camp, this was like, so it had been like in 2019, I was booking it, right? Like, and what was coming up, why I wasn't doing it is because it was selfish. And here it goes back to parenting, right? Like it's okay to spend money on business stuff because that's going to grow and you're going to make money from that, you know, your intellect, your investment, right? Your ROI. But if you're doing anything for fun or pleasure, you know, there was the money thing tied into it. There was the selfishness tied into it. And, you know, people talk about like, well, when we're, you know, when we're taken care of, then we can give to others. And I think it's great in theory, but no one teaches us how to do that, you know? And so just the term, like people thinking selfish is a bad thing, you know, like
I think it's wonderful.
it's wonderful, right? Like we're taking care of oneself, like who, if not us, who, right?
Yeah. Secure your own air mask before securing the others. Because if you're not breathing,
yeah,
you can't help anybody else.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, the difference. Like I'm noticing how much, and I've talked to some other people, like how they don't bat an eye of what they spend when it comes to business stuff. Because we have this, we've been brought up, right? That there is this difference of spending our money if it is to make us more money. But what are we spending our money, like going back to internal value, like on growing ourselves, right? Taking
Everything
care of
else comes
oneself
first.
and I always saw it as make sure everyone else is happy, nurtured, cared for, loved, taken care of, said their needs are met before my own. And I had nothing left to give.
Then we want to know why we're all resentful, right?
And exhausted.
We're angry, resentful, and like we want to hurt all the people. At least maybe that's mine.
We're hungry. We're hungry too. That's the other thing. I was fucking hungry. Yeah. Yeah.
And some of that's, I don't know, I don't know if I went off the other end of the spectrum from not having that or not feeling like I had that nurturing myself to
money.
Well, I did it for my, yeah, but how I took care of my kids or tried to take care of my kids and meet their needs before my own, because I wasn't modeled that or don't remember being modeled that. I remember being modeled something more selfish. And I wanted to make the happier experience for my kids, not knowing how to do that and doing it the only way I could figure out how, which was buying them things.
Yeah.
Because that was something I could do. And then that had its own repercussions because it went the, opposite end of the pendulum. But I didn't know how to do that connection on an emotional level. But it was like, are you happy? What can I get you? And McDonald's, was it, a new shirt? Was it sports? Was it what will make you happy? And didn't matter that I gave up all my free time to go do sports things, or, there was no time or energy left for me because I was trying to make that better for them based on my own experience. So it's like, I don't know that that was modeled for me in the way that I inherited that. I've almost inherited the opposite.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's probably me too, right? Like I know the way my mom parented me, so I didn't want to have that type of relationship. So I almost swing the other way, but I don't want to judge it and say it in an unhealthy way, right? But like we kind of go too far over because we don't want to be over here, right?
Right.
And so,
yeah,
finding that balance of.
It's
but
like
again,
what
you did the best you could with what you knew at the time.
It's totally like what Abraham talks about, the contrast being the same stick, right? Just two ends of the same stick. And we think about how, what you just said, Erin, about swinging over the other direction. And Brenda, what I heard you saying is, this is what was modeled for me. I didn't want this because it felt like it was very selfish. So I went over here to try and give my kids this because I didn't know how to do connection. I think about that with my mom. I mean, her sense of pride over being able to do family vacations and have money and put me in the same house growing up was her opposite swing. And I saw it as, I just want your love. I just want your attention. I just want but she's like, no, I'm too busy trying to provide and work and do a household and stuff like that, right? So it's being able to see the selfishness as a good thing. It's being able to say, I can be in this contrast and I don't have to swing all the way over to this contrast. Like I can find flow within the whole stick. The things that, because it's all a matter of perception, right? What we think is bad, what we think is wrong. And shifting the focus, allowing ourselves to be selfish, to shift the focus to, I have my safety within me. I have unconditional love within me. I have value within me. And when I fill that up, then I am that model and I am that for others to see that it's okay for you to be selfish. It's okay for you to make the choices that are best for you, not in resistance to what you don't want because you saw this as a bad decision.
Yeah, if I'd have learned that 30 years ago, that would be a different life, right? All we can do at this point is observe what happened, and if there's any future change, make it. But that's, yeah, didn't learn that 30 years ago.
And that's the shit that makes our fertilizer, our darkness so rich, right? So good is these experiences that we've been through.
Yeah. Ladies, I have to get back to the day job.
Okay. Yeah. Until next time.
Until next time.
Love y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.